welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our Twitter space today. Um, it's 7/8/22, and this is episode number 7 of the ledgerscale Internet of Value Open Forum, so anybody can talk. Now, the ledgerscale Foundation, we're founding this with two goals in mind. So, one, we want to provide educational services to not only to the XRP community, but to scale up the number of brains that understand how all distributed ledger technology works. And then two, one day we are going to run some hardware and help provide some infrastructure support to the various distributed ledger networks that we believe are ESG friendly and running a form of decentralized consensus. We host these spaces Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with starting around 3:30 Eastern, and typically do about 2 hours. And then on Wednesday we do a focus space. It's a different time. It's at 5 to 6 Eastern, and that's usually focused on a specific topic. If you could give us a follow, we need to get up to at least 1,000 here soon on the Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube. We do stream these spaces live from Twitter to YouTube daily. So thank you for who watches our content there and subscribes. And the whole purpose here is to engage the community. So please, anybody, if you have a question, raise your hand. And if you're curious about something, I'm sure somebody else is curious about the same thing. So it is an open forum. Please speak up, ask all the questions you can think of. Just be cordial if you do choose to speak up. And welcome to the space. Let's see, I'll invite some people up here to speak. I'm surprised we haven't had something from Judge Netburn. I know I think it was Jeremy Hogan. I think he was speculating that there'd be some sort of decision this week, but we're an hour and a half from 5 o'clock on Friday, and I haven't seen anything unless somebody else has, and I missed it.
Hey Karma, how are you? No, I haven't heard anything or seen anything about Miss 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 Neber, the judge. I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I'd kind of think that. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea how all this lawyer stuff works. This whole lawsuit thing has been. There's one guy on Twitter that keeps posting like it's been 400 and something days since the judge first told the SEC to turn over the Hinman emails. And I'm like, really? It's been over. It is that. I mean, it has been over a year. It's kind of crazy. I mean, imagine going to like, dude, when I was doing the divorce thing, like when the lawyers told me I had to cough up some information, like, I'm sorry, but that was my priority number one. Like, cough it up, you know? Um, I can't imagine just sort of telling a judge. I mean, how many? What is they're on their like fourth pushback against the judge?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about law besides the basics, but I would be embarrassed if I was the SEC and I would look at that time frame of 400 and something days that they asked me for a simple email thread that you should be able to find and just forward it. I think it's a little embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I had to do a thing one time, and I had like there's deadlines on when you have to turn this stuff in. So like you got to turn the stuff in by there's I just I mean, I guess if you're the government, though, that's a different story. If you're just a citizen, then I guess you got to follow the law. Um, Maybe the SEC doesn't have to. I don't know, man. I'm surprised though. I was kind of hoping to hear something, you know, by today. But I mean, obviously the Jeremy, I think it's Hogan guy was. I mean, he's speculating. He doesn't know what the judge is doing. Judge isn't talking to him, right?
Yeah, I think he's just going off of whatever experience he has and just kind of trying to fill in the blanks. But I find it crazy how you sue somebody, then they start defending themselves and saying, "Yeah, but we were kind of going based off of this because we're kind of similar," and then the judge goes, "Okay, can you send us that email that they were basing off of?" And the SEC is like, shut down. Like I'm embarrassed. I don't know what else to say. Like I would have to really study law to see exactly what's going on. But if you're looking at it from somebody who is coming from zero knowledge, it looks like they don't have or they're hiding something.
I mean, I don't really want to harp on it because honestly, I'm sort of over this lawsuit. There's so much more going on. I don't know if you saw the hooks thing, but yeah, I mean, I to some degree, it's like, hey, if you're like a boxer, you're gonna punch people in the face, right? If you're a lawyer, you're gonna just argue about it. Doesn't matter if there's any real reason to argue, right? It just that's what you're just gonna argue about it because it's what you do, right? Like I mean, it's just sort of almost bland at this point. Like I'm kind of really honestly, I'm just over it. I mean, I feel like I get the sense for how things are going to come out, and it's just a matter of letting the letting the baby cry itself to sleep. If that makes any sense. Like you don't really want to hear it crying, but what are you gonna do? Let it cry itself to sleep. That's kind of how I feel about this case at this point. But the hooks thing, I don't know if you saw that.
No, you want to talk about it? At least maybe break it down until we get some other people that want to ask questions. I don't mind. I've been focusing on work a little bit, and my wife is about to have our third child in like 2 weeks. So I've just been, slowly
No
trying to get
boy.
ready for that. Yeah. I'm gonna have finally my baby girl. I had two boys, now I'm gonna have a girl. So I haven't really been super focused on crypto, just whatever comes my way. But if you have stuff to talk about hooks, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, let me throw it up top. Give me 1 second. Let me find the tweet. Dur, 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 dur. Yeah, the I don't know if you knew, but Vici and them were trying to, well, not trying. They put out a WebAssembly, an easier way basically to code with hooks. Here, I think I can share this. Okay, it should be up top. Um,
Yep, I see it.
yeah, let me do one other thing. I should throw another thing up top. Um, or maybe I
Can you
can't do
explain
that.
to me what a hook is?
Yeah, basically, so you know how you have all the different types of transactions that you can do on XRP Ledger that are like native functionality, like order books, trust lines. There's obviously a bunch of configuration you can do there. Um, the NFTs are coming, the issued assets, all this kind of stuff, pathfinding, yada yada. Um, what you can do, and I don't think this is the accepted vernacular, but I just think of it as like stacking different transaction types together. So, like, say say I send you a payment, right? That's a transaction type. And then your wallet has a hook set that when you receive that payment, you place maybe an order on an order book. Okay, when you place that order on the order book, maybe somebody else that maybe that triggers another account to place an order on the order book, or um, any other type of transaction. There's some other things I could say there, but and then so you can have this kind of cascade of transactions. Um, and then if you, from like a financial engineering point of view, start thinking about like, okay, if I stack all these transactions together, what is sort of, so you think of smart contracts, right? What is sort of that's business logic. So if you can stack all of these transactions on or cascade them on top of each other, then you start to be able to ask the question like, what kind of business logic can I arrange here? And I think the answer is a lot. Like a lot of, at least a lot of the traditional types of financial services can be sort of re-engineered. There's some things um, that are maybe not exactly work the same way financial or traditional business logic works, but that open up maybe new opportunities that I think are possible. It's a pretty big deal. I mean, we get XLS 20 and hooks on mainnet. The game has changed for
So
sure.
it would have to be introduced via an amendment.
Oh yeah, it's a big one. I mean, it's bigger in my opinion, and I'm not like a super techie, but in my opinion, in terms of the functionality it enables, hooks is a bigger amendment than the XLS 20 NFT stuff, because hooks takes all the functionality that's already there and allows you to multiply it by itself. So it's like, say you got three functionalities, like you can go from one to two. Okay, cool. You can go from like two to three. That's fun, right? But if you go one times two times three, all of a sudden you got a completely different story. And the hooks allow that. They will enable that cascade of transactions. But see, then you got to know, okay, so at that point, your building blocks are the transaction types on XRP Ledger. So you gotta, if you don't know the building blocks, and it's kind of like not seeing the little block coming down in Tetris. Like if you don't know what block's coming down because you don't know your transaction types, how are you going to stick it in the right spot? You're not. Does that make any sense? I mean, it's kind of a goofy analogy, I guess, but like if you don't know your building blocks, you're not going to stack them right.
So I guess let me see if I could break this down. Let me know if I'm wrong or not. But it's kind of like hooks gives you the vision to see what's coming towards you when they allow other assets and other transactions to come on the ledger. So instead of you just being narrow sighted, now you're more wide and you have more of a range.
Not exactly. Uh, hooks. Okay, hooks. I
I'm
mean,
sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. But I know for a fact you're gonna get people that are gonna not know the basics. So it's kind of good that I'm getting this out of you.
no, that's fine. That's the purpose here. That's great. Uh, yeah, but like you gotta know the. I mean, back to the building blocks. You got to know all the different native transaction types. Taker gets, the set trust line, issue assets, quality in out, how pathfinding works, XLS 20 when that gets here, payment channels, um, you know, auth trust line or whatever that one, authorized, whatever that one is. There's all sorts of different transaction types, and this stuff's all just native to the ledger. So hooks is just like basically says, hey, you got all these sort of blocks in your toolkit and your tool chest, right? Or tool bag, whatever you want to call it. All of a sudden, you're allowed to combine them. And then it's up to you to figure out and be creative on like what sort of new things can be done now that I can combine all of these tools. Like I don't know if you've ever done like I mean like actual construction work, but sometimes you take a couple of tools, maybe you throw a vice grip on a screw and you use another tool to get a grip on it and turn it and like you know remove a stripped out screw, right? Like things like that. Or you use one tool to leverage another tool to like say pry something up that you couldn't otherwise pry up. Like I remember when we had like you put like a pry bar on something and you can't pry it up. Well, then you get a like a pipe or something and stick it on the pry bar. It gives you more leverage, and so like you combine the two tools, and then boom, you can pry up the thing that was arguing with you about not wanting to come up. That kind of thing. You get, but you got to be able to like combine these things. That's what hooks enables. It's a freaking big deal. It,
So would so if let's say I build a D app and hooks is already active, XLS 20 is active, would I now be able to pay? Well, not pay, but would I now be able to interact directly with the ledger instead of just with XRP? Now I could most likely use a side chain, or I mean, I would have to maybe come up with a code. But like maybe now instead of always accepting payments in XRP, maybe I could do it in NFTs that are coming off of the ledger. Would hooks allow me to do that, or would that just be me
sort
doing
of.
different codes?
I'm sure there's a way to do that. I mean, that's not like a problem I've thought about solving, but yeah, because let's say and let's say you had a let's say you want a trustless uh setup. So you create a wallet, and I hope this is accurate. I think it's at least close to accurate, if not actually true. But let's say you set up a wallet and you put some hooks on it. And the hook says, hey, if somebody sends this wallet an XRP, I'm going to send them a this NFT. And if they send two XRP, I'll send them that NFT. Whatever. You could probably do various things like that. I mean, you can get creative with this stuff. That's the fun part. Um, and then from a trustless point of view that if you send an XRP to that wallet, you're going to get an NFT, right? You're not trusting, let's say I'm the wallet creator, right? You're not trusting me. Let's say I black hole the wallet. You're not trusting me, right? You've checked that the wallet's black holed, which means I have no control whatsoever. You've seen that the hook is on there, um, and you can trust without caring who I am whatsoever that if you send an XRP to that wallet, it's gonna send you an NFT. And now the other or an issued asset or something else. Um, the could be like a paychan receipt or something. I mean, you just you don't whatever you got. You can really get creative with this stuff. The other part is redemptions from a black hole address are a little difficult because nobody can sign a transaction, right? So typically, if you say send some XRP to a black hole address, goodbye, it's effectively burned. It's gone. Right? No one can sign a transaction from that address, um, like a payment transaction to send the XRP somewhere. It's gone. It's burned. It's gone. So a hook might enable you to say black hole an address, yet still have that address make an outbound payment, like sign an out or send an outbound payment, whether it's XRP or an IOU. I don't know. I mean, this is something I'd actually like to look into in detail and make sure. But like, this is the kind of creativity thing that I think is that these hooks enable. It's a big deal. It really does open up the and you can cascade them. So it's not just think past just one account. Say you set up one account and something happens to that account, which triggers a transaction, which sends to account B, which triggers a transaction, which sends to account C, which triggers a transaction, which sends to account D, right? And maybe these transactions are time based. There's ways to do that with escrow and checks and stuff. Um, Dude, the creativity is almost boundless. But I'm sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over my words, but you really can just it all comes down to like how creative can you be. This is the financial engineering stuff that's fun, right? Like how can you combine all these to think of each transaction as like a function. How can you combine all these functions for the programmers in here? You'll have some like when I say function, what I'm talking about. Um, think of each transaction type as a function, and then like think of your program as a series of functions, which most programs are, and hooks enable you to do that. So you can basically program on the XRP ledger once this is live, which it's not live, but it's moving in that direction.
Seems like hooks is gonna allow the XRB to be more interoperable with each other. So it's not like just parallel things that exist.
Well,
It's gonna be like a mesh.
yeah, there's no reason a hook couldn't say be part of a bridge or a federator or an agent or a whatever you call the accounts, depending on which person's verbiage you're reading. Um, we'll go with bridge, I guess, for the lack of a better word. Well, why can't a hook interact with a bridge? So you can have a trustless bridge. That bridge gets a certain amount of a certain trans receives a transaction, say a payment transaction. Okay, maybe that payment transaction is say a redemption from the Flare network or some other Ethereum or some other network. Well, that transaction has say a destination tag. This is a black hole bridge account, so it's trustless. Why can't that trustless bridge account um, automatically process a say an XRP redemption to a say your XRP wallet, right, where you have the keys and you're in control through a hook. I think that's probably possible. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm like 95% sure that that would be possible. Like that's a big deal. That's a huge deal.
No, it sounds interesting. I'm gonna look more into it, but it sounds like you might be able to eventually maybe use other pieces of collateral to go against. Like for let me break it down. My train of thought. Would it be possible to use hooks during your exchanges. So, for example, like if I built a DEX on XRP, and hooks have been introduced already, would do you think there would be a possible way where, let's say, my bag of XRP collateralizes, and I want to buy a dip, or let's say I want to buy a dip, and I put a limit order in, and it hits, and instead of me just me buying it with USDC, could it be possible that I could buy it with like an NFT that I have that I don't want, but I wouldn't mind selling it if a certain price hits? Do you think that would be possible with hooks, like using pretty much other tools in the XRPL to pay for stuff, or vice versa?
Uh, I mean, I'm sure there's some way to figure that out. You've got pathfinding, right? So depending on how you set
That's
up the
like router
order,
hopping, right? You're trying to find the cheapest. Well, not well. An XRP would be the cheapest route, but you're trying to find the fastest route to you, the most secure. So it's kind of like routers connecting to each other, right? That's what you mean by pathfinding. Like you're trying to find the easiest route to the destination.
to some degree, but let's say the transaction is not I send you XRP. Let's say the transaction is I want to pay an XRP and you want to receive some NFT. Then pathfinding will figure out the rest. Like pathfinding will figure out the connection, whether it goes to an order book or a trust line or what have you. Um, so it'll kind of do the work for you. I mean, you could do the work for yourself if you think you're better than pathfinding. There's advantages to that approach, although you really got to know what you're doing. Um, so yeah, I mean, pathfinding it's like these bicycles I see people ride on the beach. And they pedal, but then like when they pedal at the electric bikes and then they pedal and like goes even faster, it's like that. You still got to pedal a little bit, but like pathfinding is just going to make you go faster. I don't know. Like it'll find the cheapest path. That's what its job is. I guess I'm making a comparison to going faster to finding the cheapest path, like cheaper equal faster kind of comparison.
Yeah, I understood that analogy you were using.
I think I'm going to buy one of these things too. I'm kind of excited about that. Got a deal on something. Yeah, if anybody else wants to speak up, um, we're just talking hooks at the moment. There's also XLS 20, obviously, and oh, that's not in here, but we talked about that yesterday. There's some amendments to XLS 20 that I think sound like are probably more amenable to most of the validators, so maybe more likely to get accepted into the uh, onto the ledger. So we'll see. It'll take time. I mean, everything takes time. Nothing worth doing comes easy, right?
I'm looking for a specific tweet that I want to talk about, but I'm just gonna mute myself until I find it. I haven't gone away.
What is it?
I think it was the Bank of England was rushing the European Union to come up with regulations, or I know the Bank of London was rushing somebody to come up with regulations, and I wanna put it up there because I think it's really big that the Bank of London is rushing people, because I mean I know a lot of money comes in through the United States and Wall Street, but Bank of England is, I see them as the financial center of the world, or at least London.
Well, certainly in England. Yeah, and there was some other stuff I saw with the ECB, or sorry, the BIS. What was that? It'll come to me. Castro, you got your hand up?
Yeah, quickly, when he brought up England, Europe, the volumes that is coming out of Europe into XRP right now has been exploding. So kind of tells me that, well, at least my speculation is that when Ripple was talking about, that jurisdiction being one that had kind of established some clarity, they're they're kind of using that clarity as a toehold in Europe to really kind of utilize the asset for some of its intended purposes. So whether it's Europe to Mexico or Europe to Thailand or whatever, there's definitely an increased volume of activity coming out of Europe for sure. One other thing, just real quick, Carmen, when you were talking about the amendment, yeah, I was definitely following that as well. But one thing is worth mentioning is for us to all remember that this decentralized network process that we're all kind of coming to the awareness of really requires collaborative effort at the end of the day, right? And so part of the thing that's interacting with this amendment process is that a lot of the other validators and node people are still running the older versions of Rippled, right? And so if the amendment passes, all of those people who are running that old infrastructure are going to be amendment blocked. And that's going to create a problem because they're going to have disruption. So if you know anybody that's running nodes and validators, or if we, have these kind of discussions and spaces like this, it's good to remember to encourage them to at least update to the appropriate version, right? And then, participate in what they think is a pro or con as it, applies to the amendment, but at least upgrade, because if you don't upgrade, then it's just unnecessary disruptions. And that's just the nature of decentralized systems. Like, you have to be collaborative in that regard. So just wanted to say that too, right quick.
Now you brought up a good point, Kasha, but I'll let Karma talk because I could feel that Karma has something to say.
No, you're good, and it is a good point. I mean, it's a very good point. Like, it's something that people need to recognize. If you're running hardware and you're part of the infrastructure and you don't upgrade, bye. Like, you're just gonna get left behind, basically. Um, if you're still riding a horse, you're probably not going to get to work as fast as someone driving a car. Like, you're going to get left behind. Um, uh, yeah, that's a thing. And the other part of that is, I think, when I've made this point many times, but it's about building trust. And when when you have all the validators approving these amendments and stuff, that's a trust building process, right? Like, my team has looked at the code, we've tested it, we think it's sound. Oh, nope, maybe we don't think it's sound. Nope, there's a problem. We don't like this. We're not going to approve it. Right? Um, so there's that amendment approval process. I mean, it's no different than, say, doing an amendment to the Constitution. You got to have all the states, or at least a majority of them. I have no idea how many. They all have to agree. And I don't know, I'm sure the Congress has to agree on something, and then the states have to agree on something, and then the executive branch has to agree on something. I mean, it's probably, but that whole process of doing an amendment, that's a gigantic trust building process. That's like a consensus, pun intended, a consensus building mechanism, right? Like, we all agree, okay, now we're going to no longer have slaves. Cool. Some people might be upset about that. Tough. The rest of the 80% of us decided no slaves, right? So you can either upgrade to the current version of the software, or you just get left behind. And nice knowing you, but goodbye. Right? Like, fun while it lasted, but if you're not going to keep up, then the party's going to move on. So we've had an amendment, and you either upgrade or goodbye.
Which, you know what comes to mind when I think of that? I think of Ripple's initial decision. Well, I consider it a decision, but they wanted to focus on cross-border payments between banks. And it makes sense because if you're going to have certain amendments that you're going to be introducing, you wouldn't want like your little mama pop shop to run that server, run that update. Some people might not even know how to do it. So it would make sense for all the main banks to be able to run those servers, do all those infrastructure updates. And then everybody else just pretty much has CBDC wallets because it makes it simple. A lot of people get rid of old technology because they're not willing to change a memory, a RAM stick, or do a software update. So they'll just throw it away and they'll want something new. So if you're in the payments world, you're gonna kind of want your customers to also not have to do anything crazy. So it would make sense that there will be people that just aren't gonna download these amendments, and like you said, they're gonna be lost. Well, they're not gonna be 100% lost, but they're not gonna be really able to connect with the main server.
Well, I understand what you're saying there. I'm going to disagree a little bit though, because, and we want to, we'll get to making content around this and doing it ourselves as well, which is how we'll generate the content, because I have no idea what I'm doing in terms of running a server. Um, but we'll figure it out. And and we got people that can help that know better than I. Um, but no, your individual, like anybody in this chat, should be able to run a Ripple. You don't need like a freaking data center for this stuff. Um, and especially, let's say you're a small time developer creator. You've got an idea. You think you can use XRP Ledger as a part of it. Maybe it really doesn't have to do with crypto, or it's something else you're doing, and maybe your local community or something, right? And you're just going to use the ledger for the accounting or transaction process, whatever the you're using it for. Um, you should you should be easily able to like just hop on the GitHub and pull down the next the newest ledger or the newest version of Ripple D, and there you go. Right? Like, I mean, granted, that does take some technical knowledge. I've never done it, to be honest.
Let me let me add to that, Karma. Like when Ripple made some of the decisions that you were speaking of, let's kind of just rewind the clock a little bit, right? In actuality, they were running all of the validators at that time, right, and making those decisions unilaterally, which is understood. Yeah, which was understood at that particular point in time in the ledger's development, right? It was understood that they were going to decentralize it responsibly over time, right? And so that I wanted to add in. But as it applies to banks, right, or anything other than banks, as Karma's kind of alluding to in his description, is that it's really a modular design by nature, right? And so what you're really doing is if you're coming in as an enterprise user, right, you're really setting up kind of your own UNL, your own node and everything, so that your actual business model is totally independent in and to itself. So if Ripple happens to kind of lose its validators for a flood or a fire, or just hypothetically, right, and other people drop out because they just don't want to participate anymore, you still have this core network on your side that can continue operating irrespective. And that's the decentralized nature of it all, right? So even if you're just a user, right, if eventually you're dollar cost averaging and you acquire a large portfolio just as a holder, right, you want to have a certain level of technical expertise, so that, let's say, the wallet provider, right, goes out of business or goes away, right? You want to be able to connect directly to the ledger to interact with your money, right? And same thing with,
Well,
some of the validators.
we were just talking yesterday when Vet was in here about running, like a cold storage wallet, and you can, which is something it was news to me, but apparently they have sort of a light version of Ripple D, which is basically just a wallet.
Yeah, I
It's
heard. Yeah, I heard the conversation. I couldn't talk yesterday, but you were speaking about how you could just sign a transaction with something as easy as a Raspberry Pi, right? And that's that among many other potential pieces of hardware, very simplistic in nature, particularly with other tools being provided now that are all open source, right? You can pretty much easily set up something that if your wallet provider or some of these other things go down, from the base layer, right? You know how to connect to the ledger, submit the transaction, and be able to, continue activity where it's just moving your money or whatever it is that you need to do, right? So with decentralization comes a whole lot of responsibility, and no one's expected to learn it instantly or overnight, but just
Oh
definitely
no.
kind of put some time into, saying I'm going to eventually get there, right? Because you never want to be dependent on anyone else in order to make a transaction with the ledger. And that is the ideal situation that we should all be striving toward.
Well, I I couldn't agree more. Um, yeah. Uh, and it took me a little while, like a couple of years, to be quite honest. I mean, there was not as much documentation and things back then, but um, to figure out and do things myself. When they shut down Ripple Trade, that kind of definitely threw a monkey wrench in my playing with the ledger, for sure. Um, but yeah, I think you should. This is why self custody is so important. But if you don't know how to self custody, then like my ex has a pretty significant bag of XRP, and she literally screamed and yelled at me about all this. Now she's gonna probably make a shitload of money, but that's fine, I guess. She has no idea how to handle it. I mean, when I was nice enough, anyhow, when the Flare airdrop was going on, and I pissed me off. I shouldn't have done this, but I did. I did her claim. So she's gonna get all of that too. Um, but she has no freaking clue, man. No
Yeah,
clue.
that's what's so crazy about the old days, right? Like in the old days, you were forced to have to know some of the things that are taken for granted now because other developers came in and made some of this so easy that people kind of forgot where we really came from, right? So I don't care if it was a paper wallet or whatever we had to use back in those days, right? We did whatever we had to do to be able to, engage with the space at that time, right? So like
She's
I
got a
do.
paper wallet and she has absolutely no clue.
Right, right. I
Could
get it,
be
man.
Songbird rewards. She has absolutely no clue. I mean, I'm not going to manage her money for her.
Right, right.
That's off the table. I didn't. I really. It was more out of respect for her dad that I helped out. But yeah, I'm not going to manage that. She has absolutely no idea, and she's just got it sitting there. I mean, she's probably, I don't know. It's probably a few $100,000 USD. Like, she has no fucking clue.
Right, right.
I just whatever. And I'm not. I'm certainly not going to help her or teach her. Like,
And I guess it says something about the person subtly in that they have access to it and don't need it to the point where they're not worried about it at this point too, right? So Because I guarantee times get
Oh
rough
no,
enough.
I'm sure she could use it. I'm
Oh
sure she could
wow.
use it. She just doesn't know. She doesn't know. She didn't. She never would. Anyway, that's a different story. She didn't fuck. She didn't listen.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah, that's interesting.
she'd tell me I was lying, and I'm like, yeah, but you know, the thing is, I'm not actually lying. Lawyers figured that out. Um, and but yeah, I mean, people have to be able to handle self custody,
Yeah, it's a big
and
responsibility.
these hardware wallets are cool. Um, I've got one sitting here on my desk that I just haven't activated because I don't really trade that much. But I mean, I might do one or two things every. I mean, not really, very infrequently. Um, but I do want to use it just to
Let me ask you this,
have fun
Karma.
with it.
Do you think some of this is a symptom of how we perceive the assets themselves, right? So people focus on the nominal value of the units of account, right? And we call them XRP, Satoshis, Bitcoin, et cetera, right? When in reality, what's kind of just really going on, as you always say, is you have this public-private key relationship to an account, right? And if you kind of really understood that relationship, right, you're not so much focused on what the actual asset side of it is, right? And you're understanding that you have this sovereign ability to interact with the account via your public-private key dynamic.
Uh, so I think the key pair part, the key pair aspect is more about control, right? And you can do multi-sig on top of that. But to me, okay, if that's the only cool thing, now we're talking about Bitcoin, right? Because that's all it does. That's the we just extinguished the entire Bitcoin documentation. That's it. Public private key pair, and you can send a payment in Bitcoin, and you've just exhausted the entire functionality set. Um, Big breakthrough, however, versus I think the public private key pair thing is important for like XRP Ledger, Ethereum, etc. But all the functionality that say XRP Ledger or Ethereum or when or Flare, Songbird, all the functionality that these networks enable, it's that's where it's the functionality that is the like the root of the value creation. You know,
Right.
that's why it's so
But
goofy to me
here,
that Bitcoin is so
here,
expensive because the functionality is essentially nil. And then you got these other networks like I would think both XRP and Ethereum would be worth more than Bitcoin. Like just from a functionality set like standpoint. Like look at what you can do with Ethereum, look at what you can do with XRP Ledger. Look at what you can do with Bitcoin. Not much. Like this is one of these reasons I've said so many times this market has behaved very odd, very weird.
yeah, but here's where I would throw a twist in it, right? I understand what you're talking about is a contrasting functionality versus non-functionality, right? But I think at the core of what blockchain is, even if we throw in the functionality, is the ability to manage it with the private public key dynamics, right? Because if not, then you're just using this functionality in a centralized database, right? And you could come up with the same functionality, right? What's distinguishing it from being iterated in a centralized manner is the ability to do it in a decentralized manner, which is predicated on the public-private key functionality.
That's a very good point. Excellent point. I agree. Yeah. I mean, putting these functionality sets into an environment where I don't have to trust you to execute, you know, your side of the deal because the code's going to enforce that you execute your side of the deal. is that's a form of value. I mean, this is why I call the XRP ledger a clearinghouse. This is the core function or value creation that a clearinghouse does. Is they take the opposite side of everybody's trade, right? So if I'm the clearinghouse and you come in and you're like, hey, I want to trade, 3 cattle futures. I'm going to say, well, you got to show me where you got 3 cattle, right? Because if I sell this contract through the clearinghouse to say NYC crypto or NY crypto, and then he ends up wanting these 3 cattle, like I got to make sure as the clearinghouse that NY crypto gets his 3 cattle. Right? Like I'm on the hook, right? Like I as the clearinghouse, I'm the opposite. I'm the counterparty to Kashta's wanting to sell what would that be, a call for 3 cattle, and I'm also the counterparty for NY crypto wanting to buy that call for 3 cattle. And I make a spread for facilitating the market. It's market maker, right? But yeah, you got to have that. I mean, in the XRP ledger, in a very real sense, is a new form factor of a clearinghouse. I don't know if I'd
Right.
say the same thing about Bitcoin. I would not say the same thing about Ethereum. Ethereum's a different beast. I wouldn't say the
Yeah.
same thing about, well, maybe with the F assets you could go there on Flare. You might be stretching it. I've never really thought about that till just now.
No, I think you're absolutely right, though. Right? It's that ability to keep plugging into the system and being able to create that gives it a whole lot of value, right? In the way that it does that, right? And that's why, from a utility perspective, right, Bitcoin, Ethereum will always be limited, right? Because at the core, it'll never be able to, on a level playing field at least, it'll never be able to provide the end user with a good enough experience that you could create a product that would be an actually good product, right? That's the problem with those type of systems.
This is why when the Ripple folks came out with the Interledger protocol, and then they just gave it away, like, what? Like, you just had, like, that was a significant innovation. Okay, like, seriously, and you're just going to give it away. But it was actually kind of a genius strategic move, because it was like throwing down the gauntlet for, like, let's play on a level playing field, and I think and reasonably so, were confident enough that if you put all these other digital assets on a level playing field, at least in the payments game, because that's the focus, right? They're not focused on this other stuff, so whatever, they don't care. But in the payments game, if you throw all these other ledgers on a level playing field, RippleNet and plus XRP ledger, the combo of the two different networks, dude, nobody's going to compete.
All right. Yeah, I think it's pretty brilliant that Stefan really explains it, kind of amazing the way that he describes it, because he was, along with Evan, were kind of the creators of it, right? And so he was so influenced by his, number one, kind of developer mind frame, right? And his experience with the internet. You can see where it influenced his design of what the Interledger protocol became, right? Because it was like, I understand the same way we needed standardizations in how we were going to actually build this internet, right? Because the first iteration of the internet wasn't as, or mature or articulate as the version we had later years and even now, right? And it's like understanding the need for that standard to exist in order for it to evolve. And then he took that concept into payments, right? And so, I guess that it kind of explains a little bit why he decided to give it away, right? Because if he didn't give it away, it never had truly ability to become a standard, so to speak, right? It would have continued to just be the property of said holder, right? And so, yeah.
Well, there's that aspect. I think that aspect makes sense too. Yeah. I mean, because if you want to, that's why I say it was a little bit like throwing the gauntlet down. It was like, hey, we're going to just throw this out there. We're going to give it away. The reason you just said is one of the reasons. But the other reason is like when I say throw the gauntlet down, it was a little bit like, hey, because at the time, the predominant concept in like the crypto community was one ledger to rule them all. And so Interledger protocol basically just tossed that out the window.
Right. Yeah, there
Right?
was definitely
Like,
a mindset of one ledger to rule them all at that time. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
and I hope maybe one day we can have Stefan, maybe Evan on here. That would be fun. Um, and talk. I'd actually like to just talk to them about Interledger protocol. Mostly, maybe we can do that for a focused thing.
Yeah, it's interesting technology. It can be used a lot of different ways, right? Particularly like we tend to think of things from a Western. I know I'm speak for myself, right? From a Western perspective, a lot of times, because that's what I'm mostly experienced with, right? But I can see where, from a micro payments perspective, right? A lot of things that are trying to be done any other way would no way compete with what the Interledger protocol is able to do, right? And so with the wide range of values, trying to force somebody into these high value kind of transactions in comparative, right, kind of definitely puts ILP on an upgrade status compared to other potential potential alternatives.
Well, I think too, if you look at Coil, so you got Interledger protocol, right? All right. Here's kind of the tech stack from the bottom, at least the way I think of it, which is probably not the way a technical person or a technical professor, but this is just how I think about it. So that's that. At the bottom foundational layer, you have XRP ledger. Uh, then you have your payment channel transaction type. Okay, so you can basically pre-fund a balance into an XRP into a payment channel. You can pre-fund some XRP into a payment channel. Then you have Interledger protocol. So that enables, I'm just going to use Coil as an example. That enable this could be any. Let's just call this I'll just call it an Interledger protocol ILP connector. So then you have an ILP connector, right? They're connected with the payment channel. Okay. So now that ILP connector can be connected, if we go back to the Coil example, with, say, somebody serving up websites, whatever. Doesn't matter what the hell it is. Just a picture or a word or a video, doesn't matter. Just somebody serving up some sort of whatever. And from a web server. And then, you send over the ILP receipts from the payment channel through the connector, sends those over to the recipient, right? And this can be done effectively as fast as all of these parties can communicate. And there's only really two parties communicating, the connector and the recipient. when the recipient's ready to collect, they can go, again, back to what we were talking about earlier with self-custody. They can go back to the XRP ledger and cash in those receipts and collect all the value that is whatever XRP they're owed. You know, but the recipient can know that the good for the money, right? So they can go ahead and serve up their end users whatever it is the person is downloading or pulling off the call it a picture, video, whatever, it doesn't matter. Article. Yeah, that's kind of the stack. So you got the XRP ledger, then you got payment channels, then you got Interledger protocol, then you got the Interledger protocol connector, then you got the connection between that connector and the recipient, then you got the recipient completing the circle back to the XRP ledger to cash the receipt. Done.
Right. I'm gonna use an actual use case that for an example and to draw a picture, right? But I know a lot of us probably sign up to different kind of streaming services, Hulu, Netflix, podcast, whatever, Spotify, whatever all these different little services are, right? And we've all probably experienced, right, the friction and having to pay that set amount. Sometimes you use it once a month, sometimes you use it every day, right? And when you don't really use it, it's lost value, right? So what brilliant about the ILP for me is that it provides that ability if developers take the opportunity, right? So that you can create this environment where you're only paying by use. Right. So whether it's Netflix, whether it's Hulu, whether it's Spotify, whether it's YouTube, like whenever you go on, you're paying in real time in fractions of fractions. Right. And you're only consuming what you use at that time. Right. And they're getting that value in real time as you consume it. Like that is amazing potential.
That's the web monetization part. And I think that's extremely important. But also consider at least in my opinion, there's 0% chance you would have CBDC without Interledger protocol, because there's no way any central bank is going to give up control over their ledger, right? So you're going to have a protocol. I mean, you just have to have some way to connect a ledger that the fiat of whatever jurisdiction central bank is managing, and connect that ledger to other ledgers, right? So you need a protocol there, and the Interledger protocol has no vested interest. It's not like if I choose to use Interledger protocol, like Ripple makes a bunch of money. They don't make nothing, right? It's just a protocol. It's just like nobody makes anything when I send an email and use HTML. It's just the networks connect and blah, whatever. I mean, it's nobody gets paid for that. There's no friction. It doesn't matter what networks I'm connecting to. Yeah, like you you can't have the CBDC actual realize the Internet of Value, because you're not going to realize the Internet of Value without digital fiat. That's a fantasy land for anybody. If I don't think there's anybody in this chat that would think that, but that's not realistic at all. So you have to digitize the fiat, and you're going to have like an Interledger protocol to connect those digital fiats, CBDCs, or I guess e-money is what the Boston Fed came out with. They didn't want to use the word CBDC, whatever.
Yeah, for the interoperability aspect of it, right, it is definitely the secret sauce to having any of this stuff work at scale, right? So, yeah, I definitely concur with you on that level. Like it is, and it allows you the freedom to still do whatever it is that your choice is, and just simply add a connector, right? You become part of the family unit of everybody else that has that connector, right? So, yeah, that's brilliant.
Well, I mean, think about just like the basics of like currency and banking. Like I gotta say, and if you're the only man in the world, you don't have all the money in the world because there is no money, right? Like currency is inherently a networking tool. Um, I don't need any money if there's no one that I can, buy something off of with it, right? Like if there's nobody else around, and it, it's literally worthless. I mean, it's a network. Uh, it's a networking tool. It helps. It helps. That's why I say it's a tool for people working together, right? Like working together is like networking, right? I guess it's in the word. Actually, I never thought about that. Networking. Yeah, you're working together with a net of people. Kind of makes sense. Maybe I'll keep that. Um, the other thing is banking is the same way. Like it's a network business. I mean, look at the correspondent banking network. I know what it was. The Basel three or Basel or sorry BIS people posted something, or maybe we were talking about this yesterday. Although the BIS people did post something, and I'm telling you, it sounded a lot like a combination of XRP Ledger and Interledger Protocol and CBDCs. Somebody argued with me. I didn't respond, but they yeah, the banking's a networking industry.
Yeah,
Like
I'm almost
you
confident
gotta.
that you could probably say confidently now, right, that that's exactly what they're planning from a design standpoint, right? Because they published enough of the information that unless they just pivot and go a different direction, or they're publishing and lying to us, yeah, that's definitely the direction that they're going. I think the only little, argument that they're still trying to have is like, I think a lot of people at the table are still saying, okay, at the heart of this system that we're going to build, right, is still going to be this trial, experiment, and push to put some collateralized real world, so to speak, assets, running through the network, right? And so that's kind of the conversations that are really, really going on, right? So they're like, it's fine if you have your Bitcoin experiment or you have your Ethereum experiment or whatever is a tangent to the system. But at the core of what they want to interact with is going to be some kind of asset-backed digital asset, right? And I think that conversation is the one that they're really having.
Well, that was a actually another thing. Hold on, let me see if I can find this and post it up top. Um, because there's two guys. One of them's dead, unfortunately. Uh, hold on, where is it? Dalio did an interview. Okay, here it is. All right, I should have just thrown it up top. Dalio did an interview with the one of these economic clubs. I forget which one, and at some point, they do these things and they make their points in the beginning, and then like the questions start, and that's the fun stuff because then they don't know what the hell you know what they're going to get asked, right? So then you get kind of more, I feel like, truth. It's one of the reasons I like this forum. um but he made a comment. Hold on, let me look at what it was because I put it in the thing. He made a comment. Oh, alternative currencies, and actually, I put the mark 49, but back up 30 seconds or something. And he actually addresses some crypto stuff. And then the other guy that I tagged there, Bernard. If you haven't seen, or I mean, if you're into this stuff, if you haven't seen or consumed his work, he's the guy that's passed. Um, his work goes back to the beginnings of crypto and complementary currencies, and he's got two books. And he was played a pretty big role in the creation of the euro. Um, he's one of those guys like kind of behind the scenes. Um, but his thinking is also very worth looking at. And I thought it was interesting that Dalio used the term alternative currencies, where Bernard used the term complementary currencies, right? Because in both cases, both of those terms sort of insinuate the like sister currency. Like there's not just one. There's like an alternative currency or like a complementary currency, like the you know. So and they're reading between the lines. They're both actually making the same point, which I agree with.
Yeah, I've been leaning towards the use of alternative currencies more lately, right? I think it kind of accurately describes my intent of how I'm using them. I've kind of been leaning towards that particular connotation lately.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that?
No, I was, no, I was just adding on that I said lately I find myself leaning more towards using the alternative currency context, right? Because it probably more accurately describes my intent and how I'm using them. And so I'm a little more comfortable using that connotation now, alternative.
Well, I mean, if you really want to think from a like a financial portfolio point of view, um, you never really want to. I mean, I'm going to steal his term, but I don't mean to mimic him. But you never really want to. I mean, like cash is trash. That's Dalio's thing, and and that's true. And the thing that people don't realize when you put your finance hat on, like your decision making hat, is you're always choosing between at a minimum of two alternatives, right? So on like Monday one might weigh more and on Tuesday the other might weigh more, right? And so then you want to bounce back and forth and always take the best alternative. Is at least, I mean, obviously you can't tell the future, but you can sort of see the direction the wind's blowing. um so it's opportunity cost, I guess is the term. But yeah, I mean, you gotta but a lot of people like to think in absolute terms, which that always boggles me. uh no, when you're doing finance, you're always choosing between options. You're trying to measure the options, um manage the which options you choose, or and by options I mean multiple. You might not want to say do a full allocation to one thing. I actually had to do a margin call on a guy, and we took his college saving, and we took his house. So yeah, that was a bad one. um uh but yeah, I mean, you got to manage your options. Weighing those options is like the science of, I don't know. In some sense, I feel like that's finance. It's like it's decision making. I lost a multi-year argument with a pretty high up tech guy, and I was arguing that the tech guy should have the corner office, not the finance guy, right? Because from my point of view, I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, the tech guy he did all the building, right? Like he did all the, made this happen. Um, and then I finally lost the argument or had to capitulate, which was reasonable. Because he was like, yeah, you know, We went back and forth on this for like probably 2 years. Not like every time we spoke, but a few times. And and he was like, yeah, but one, the tech guy doesn't know what to build until the business rules are written. So there's that. And then what was his other point? Oh, the you got to make it financially feasible. And the
Right.
tech guys aren't usually paying attention to that, like when I first stumbled into the XRP community, like it was mostly just tech guys, like very few financial people. And there was some things, I don't remember what, but where some people, and I was like, okay, from a tech point of view I can see where that would make sense, but I can promise you from a financial point of view that is that is not going to work. Like, there's a reason people do things. It's not like everybody that lived before us is stupid or was stupid. Like, there's a reason things are done the way they are. Doesn't mean things can't change. I'm all for change, but and innovation, I love it. But there's also reason to recognize why things are done the way they are. And I hope I've helped some folks over the years understand some of that stuff. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, they kind of act as translators in a way, right? Because the computer guys can be talking one language, right? And the economic guy can understand higher level principles, but if it's supposed to be used by a bunch of, for the lack of better word, laymen, right? Somebody has to be the translator, right? It's a lot of times a good
Well, that's
financial
your
guy knows.
UI. But when I agree with your comment though, somebody has to be the translator.
Right.
That's the guy who can know both the software and the. So if you're taking the software, what is software? The tool. Okay, that's all it is. Um, here's a hammer, right? Now, what are you going to do with it? Well, if you have no idea how to use a hammer, then like you're not going to really do anything with it. You're probably just going to set it down and walk away and not really care. Um, it's you got to be able to apply the tool. It's the application. It's the hitting the nail, right? It's not the hammer that's so cool. It's the fact that you drove a nail. That's the application. Drive the nail. Like nobody buys a drill because they want to drill. This is an old analogy. They buy the drill because they want the freaking hole. Nobody wants the drill. Like who sits around and like looks at their drill all night? Like, get the hell out of here. You want the hole. Um so, you know, you gotta, if you don't know how to apply it, and this is where some of the more technical folks I feel don't, there is a tone, and this has been around for years, of a lack of, and it's deserved, a lack of respect for the business folks from the tech, and this is, I'm talking in like companies and stuff, like office politics type thing, where the technical folks have a lack of respect for the business folks. But I in, I do think it's deserved. But I think that there's a little bit of short-sightedness there. I think it's deserved because the business folks in the current environment typically don't understand this stuff. So when they're talking to the tech folks, like there's no waves connecting. Like there's no, both parties are basically like listening to each other going, does not compute, right? Like they don't, it's a struggle. Like the business person doesn't understand the parameters or the capabilities or functionality limitations of the technology, right? The technologist or developer doesn't understand what the hell it is the business person's trying to get done. Like they don't get the goal, right? They're thinking, they're hearing, I need to, you want me to do what? And like, I'm
Let,
not sure
let,
if that's doable, right?
let
Like
me add
that's
this one. Let me add this one. Sometimes some of it is not even business related at the end of the day, though, right? I think sometimes a lot of this comes from this, what I'll describe as cops and robbers dynamic, right? So the cops and the robbers, right, they see this embedded utility in these things that innovators and inventors try to create, right? And they may not understand all the dynamics, but they see the potential utility to subvert the cops. The cops see it as the potential utility to catch the robbers, right? And then they kind of dig down over time into the details, you know what I'm saying, to figure it out. But their first thing that they see a lot of times is just, okay, this allows me to evade the cops, and this allows me to catch the robbers, and they build off of that.
um I don't know. I think the first thing the tech guys see is this business dude has no freaking clue what he's talking about,
Yeah, but a
right?
lot of tech guys are not really business orientated, right? They just see a potential like art
Right, but
almost. They're
if you
like, I
go
want to
ask
create
someone,
something new.
if if I come to you and I say, "Hey, Kashta, I want you to build me a deck," and I hand you a hammer and like no lumber and no nails, right? Like you're gonna look at me and be like, "This guy has no freaking clue what he's talking about," right? Like, what you got? No saw. You got what? Like what? You know? And then from the business guy's point of view, because they don't always understand. Oh, you mean you need a saw and nails? And okay, I can understand lumber, but you need a saw and nails? Like I thought you just put the lumber together sort of magically, and that was a deck, right? Like that's the business guy. And and you know, so they're looking at the tech guy going, like, just do the freaking thing, right? Like I hired you as a developer, build it, build the deck. There's often a mismatch, and this is why a good meeting of the minds is so valuable.
Yeah, it's kind of what Kasha was saying, that what's really important right now for those two guys to communicate well were to have that translator. So yeah, I agree with you that that meeting of minds is good, because then you'd be able to, it'll kind of be like, you ever played those when you were in school? You would have a list of English words and then a list of Spanish words, and your test was to connect what was milk in English with what was milk in Spanish. And I'm not saying that finance and tech are the same, but that translator would be able to go into the room and go, okay, you mean this word in finance, and you're trying to get this in tech, and it would be like
Is it
that line.
is it leche?
Yes, yes, you're right. It is leche,
Okay.
but it's
I'm
just like
not a
Costa
milk
was
fan.
saying. You need that translator, so that, which is why I agree that fintech companies is a really great business venture, because you have to technically be that translator. You have to have network
Well,
engineers and technicians, but you also have to have some form of financial consulting so that you can mix them together.
in a very real and intentional um, sense with ledger scale, that's part of what we're doing. There's two key bodies of knowledge. I'm going to outsource the third, but you've got to know the tech and the ledger and transaction types and trust lines and order books and all the payment channels and interledger pro, all, dude, there's just a gazillion things in the tech side, right? um but then if you're going to take this tool, this technology, and you're going to apply it to financial services, well, you've also got to understand what is this how what is this application that I'm applying. I mean, if I'm going to apply this tool, what is it? Am I building a deck? Am I building a birdhouse? Am I just smashing wood? and like poking stick like nails into random pieces of wood. Like what am I doing? Right? So you got to know the financial markets to determine how you're going to apply this tool, which I
Here's,
hope that
here's,
makes sense. I mean,
yeah, here's one caution point I would add to that, though, right? So I agree with you 100%, Karma. But when it comes to being that translator, here's why I say having diversity on your team is one thing that also needs to be considered, right? Because a lot of people who have the kind of good financial background, economic background, technical background, sometimes tends to be people of above average means, right? And if you're making a product that's going to go worldwide throughout every demographics, right? You want to have that diversity in your team so that when you're getting down to the translation aspect of it, you have people who can give input to say, hey, look, well, this is how that thing may operate down in the hood that none of y'all may know nothing about, right? Or here's how this may operate in the West Coast, where if you're East Coast, you know nothing about, right? And so I think diversity becomes a really big, important part of building these teams as well.
I would tend to agree with that. I think that this is part of why sometimes I've said this in these chats. Like I try and take some of these more complex maybe concepts and boil it down into like farm boy knowledge. And I'm not trying to make fun of farm boys. Like I know people that are good friends that dude, you work your ass off on a farm, and trust me, they're smart. It's not like they're stupid people. They just aren't doing financial stuff, right? But they got a lot of problems they figure out, and they figure them out, and there's no one they can rely on or call for help, right? You figure it out or you don't. So these are not stupid people. Um, but I try to, at least I make an intentional effort. I don't know if I succeed, but I try to break some of these things down to the simplest terms I can. I usually try and do that through analogies and stuff. Um, hang on, this is a business call. I gotta take this.
Yeah, while he's taking that, I'll just quickly say, yeah, that's why I would like to see more female participation in these kind of projects. Right at the end of the day, from a developer's perspective, as well as some of these influencers and other aspects, right? Because they know how it may be going on inside of a demographics that you're not a part of, so you can't even know, right? Or they're more in deal with, say, another lifestyle, right, that you're not a part of, and so you don't know how that thing interacts in that part of their particular lifestyle, right? And so I do encourage more women to step up and participate in this space, just based on kind of those very dynamics, right? Like all of this stuff is supposed to be a unifier, right? And if it's being originated by one particular centralized demographics, right? I think you're going to see some flaws in it just because of that, right? So, yeah, if we're going to keep the decentralized movement going, let's completely decentralize it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we could take it a step further and add age groups. Like I would love for the super young, the young crowd, the older people, the people that speak straight Arabic or they speak, you know what I mean, like Spanish, or yeah, the diversity needs to grow. We need to start reaching out to more people to get more input so that we can actually, exactly what you said, make this more decentralized and not have it just narrow, like just not narrow minded, but it'll widen our view if we bring more people into the fold.
Yeah, because at least you get a good indicator, like if you're trying to really address a problem or if it's just your problem, right? I think that's some of the dynamics we have sometimes. Like, is it really a problem when we're talking about 7 billion people, or is it a problem for 10,000 people and you've identified what is definitively a problem, but it's just not a problem at scale, like somebody who's trying to address a 7 billion person problem, right?
Well, I think part of the sorry about that by the way, but I think part of the thing with side chains and interledger protocol is that horizontal scalability, because there is 0% chance you're going to have any ledger. I don't care which one it is. It could be the central bank ledger, could be the XRP ledger, could be the Bitcoin. None of them are going to handle 7 billion people. Period. Not going to happen. So you got to have that horizontal scaling. You got to have that interledger to connect all those side chains, if you will. I guess that's the term nowadays. Um, that's the only way, federated. I guess they're called federated side chains, but federated, if you don't know that word, look it up. It's a good word to know. You got to do that, or else you're never going to get there. Not for
Very good.
everybody.
No, very good point, man, because some people are perverting this notion of, XRP is supposed to handle all the money, right? And if you go back historically where the all the money phrase came from, it came from Evan Schwartz and them talking about ILP, right? And because all of the money, when you connect to everything, right, can then flow over the Interledger protocol, right? It was never as if through a tokenization model or through a whatever, all of the money was going to be remitted via XRP as a bridge. Like that was never the ultimate like thing that Ripple was publishing out. And so a lot of times when you see these things, just remember that the origin of the all the money phrase was in reference to Interledger protocol. And as Karma's describing, it's agnostic to value, right? And so it's a big distinction. So when you hear these things, just know that, you maybe for, just omission or intent, they're misleading.
Well, I mean, interledger protocols, you don't even have to use technology. Like you can settle up. Okay, here's a true but kind of interesting story. Um, um, so my ex's dad's father, I guess great grandfather, they were one of the initial settlers in Texas, and he worked for the bank in the local town. Well, back in those days, this is like the late 1800s, banking was a disaster back then. Complete, like, free for all. You want to talk about the Wild West? That was your Wild West. I don't think crypto's anywhere near the Wild West like that was. But um, on Sundays, once a week, uh, he would have to, he would take, so like, patrons of the bank would like say I wrote you a check and you banked at my bank, right? And okay, say person A wrote person B a check. Person B took the check to the bank they used to cash the check. So the bank of person B honors the check. Cool. Well, person A does not bank at the same bank. So what happened is, I mean, I'm being completely literal. On Sundays, the bankers men is what they called themselves. Would They would take a wad of cash and the checks, and like say the dozen banks from the few surrounding counties, like all the bankers men would come and meet at some place, right, and effectively settle up. And so, if you were the other bank, I would give you a check that says, hey, I gave this guy $10 because of your check. And so you'd give me the $10 and I'd give you the check back and we'd be settled. And that's just how things were done. So you can do the same thing with Interledger protocol. You could literally settle up and, I don't know, beach sand, like whatever, it doesn't matter. But before you settle up, it's like a Interledger protocol plus payment channels. It's like a clearing mechanism. It's not settlement. You clear and then you settle with that. So that's another, clearing is another form of like creating leverage. if that makes any sense, because you're spanning a time gap between transaction and settlement of the transaction. So yeah, there's got to be some leverage there. Well, maybe not leverage, but not leverage. There's well, you're leveraging time, you're not leveraging value. So those are two different things. But yeah, I mean, it's you could have used these same methods back with horses and stuff. I mean, it's the whatever.
Right. But there was a when we start talking about historically, right? There was a point in time, right? We're talking about back in the historical old days of horses and etc., right? When, for the lack of a better term, right, people had sound money, right, and they weren't operating under the same dynamics of a
No,
post Bretton Woods environment, right, where fiat
no,
kind of was the core of the day, right? So I'm ultimately
no,
asking the question.
Cashta. I gotta disagree with you there. They didn't. They had the opposite of sound money
Explain.
because so back then. Okay, so what the Federal Reserve? Okay, so we had the greenback created during the Civil War. Now that was in the Union side. Whatever the currency was in the Confederate side, I don't know, but um, I'm sure there. I know that there was one. I just don't know what the hell it was called. The all these banks would like I could just ruck up in the town. Let's say I move out west to Kansas. I don't know wherever, somewhere out west, and there's no bank, right? And so I'm like, hey, I'm gonna start a bank. Cool. So I just start issuing basically balances. People deposit gold. Maybe I got a safe in the back that I keep it in. People start issuing, giving me gold or giving me. Uh, at this point, there would have been central bank fiat, basically central bank liabilities like paper stuff, and so I could take that as a deposit instead of gold, and then I would do my fractional reserve process. I'd lend out money, and then that's a process of creating money.
Right. But I'm kind of contrasting a pre-fiat world from a post-fiat world, right? That was kind of where I was drawing the line at it, right? And what I'm saying is, even if
Well,
you use gold as that common denominator,
the late 1800s already had fiat, but in addition to fiat, they had private issued. Like when I issue that money, when I give you a loan as that bank, that private bank, in say the late 1800s, that's like karma dollars, basically. Okay, what the hell are karma dollars worth?
right?
Who
I
the
get it, but all I'm saying is, even during those times, right? At least they had at least one common denominator was the gold, right? So if I didn't have the fiat, I didn't have the karma dollars, my gold would still be recognized as a form of value, no matter where potentially I was at, right? And so that's all I was saying.
sort of, but see, there used to be books that the banks would have, right? So like say I traveled from Kansas to I don't know, Boston. Um the Boston, bankers and merchants would have books, and I'd be like, "Hey, I want to write you a check for my room and board from like the Kansas State Bank or whatever the hell." Um that merchant slash banker is going to be looking at me going, what? And so
Right,
then they had a book, and they would go look, and they would say, okay, the book would tell them basically the FX rate, right? So they would say, okay, so $1 from the Kansas State Bank is worth, I don't know, 70 cents to us. So then they would make a price adjustment and all this kind of process. And then it wasn't until the Fed, that all of that kind of disappeared. And the late 1800s were plagued with financial collapse after financial collapse. I mean, literally, the man J.P. Morgan had to save the country because there was no central bank. I think that was in the 1890s. I mean, this is in large part why we ended up with a Federal Reserve again. There used to be
But,
one. Pretty sure it was
but
Andrew
hold on,
Jackson got rid of it.
but hold on. Before you characterize that, right? Because there's something that I would want to kind of pull out of that, right? Because what you're saying is actually true, right? But is the banker actually stepping in and actually providing a solution by creating the fiat, right? Or was it more to the point that you should have solved the bad behavior that led to you being in debt, that caused you to need a savior, right? And so that's what I'm saying. Like ultimately, what caused the early United States to keep fumbling and looking to these private forms of money or otherwise was the fact that they kept getting in debt because they had conflict after conflict and they over leveraged themselves trying to acquire food, weapons, etc., right, to continue these conflicts. So I don't think that from my perspective, the central bankers really came in and provided a solution. You really just put a band-aid on a bullet hole that we're still experiencing to this day because nobody's going back to what the actual causation is, and is saying that you cannot perpetually live by overextending yourself by any means, right? And so it was kind of getting to the core question that I wanted to ask is even with the efficiencies that blockchain can provide, whether it's interledger protocol, bridge currency, et cetera, until we come to the realization that we can't over leverage ourselves from an individual standpoint and from a national standpoint, is blockchain really going to solve any problem?
I think it solves a trust building problem, and I want to say yes and no to your comment. Like I can make a I can go both ways on this. Um, yeah, I do think the central banks and stuff, because so what the central bank did. So the root of the problem with most of the financial collapses in the late 1800s was private credit creation. And we want that. Okay, this is what the banks actually do. This is their core function, is credit creation. Credit creation adds elasticity. Credit creation allows for all sorts of good to occur. If you overdo it and get over leveraged, like you were saying, it can be bad, right? It's a double edged sword. But you don't want to take the sword out of the fight, right? You at least want the opportunity to use the sword, creating credit, um, to help, right? I don't know, cut the bale of hay or whatever. Um, uh, oh, what was your other point? The no part.
No, but I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think that's what made DeFi attractive to the higher echelon of people who are thinking about these things, right? Because not because somebody wants to borrow a few dollars, go on and make another trade and then make more dollars off of those dollars, right? But it's the idea that you could provide a mechanism where people are legitimately going to be borrowing for enterprise and growing their businesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you're limited by actual value that's there, right? And you're not borrowing from this other dynamics that we used to have where you could be borrowing money that never existed, right? And that's what keeps causing the problem. So DeFi created this dynamic where, go ahead.
That's the fractional reserve model,
Right.
right? Because the fractional reserve. Okay, so um, have you seen that Perry Merlin thing that I've shared a few times with the hierarchy of money?
Yes.
Okay, put that in your head. Um, and then you got to think of money as central bank liabilities. That's like paper cash, right? Then um, then you have credit creation, which the commercial banks do, and you want that credit creation. And yeah, the fractional reserve business model does effectively create money out of nothing, right? I mean, that's how it works. Um, if I deposit $10 and you loan out $9 and you still owe me 10, now there's $19. Where'd those other nine come from? Right? They just got created. So there's that aspect, and and that provides some elasticity, which is desirable from a systemic point of view. It can be dangerous from a systemic point of view. That's why you get bank runs and stuff. That's just how it works. I mean, and I don't. I think it would be this. So I think it would be foolish to get rid of fractional reserve. I would like to see, and hopefully these maybe these crypto exchanges. I generally refer to them as like narrow banks because they're take deposits, but they don't do fractional reserve, and I feel like that gives a good counterweight to the leverage creation of the fractional reserve. Obviously, the central banks are never going to be retail. They're not going to. You and I will never have an account with the central bank. It's never going to happen. But you know, other organizations could have an account with the central bank. And who's got their mic on? And uh, be a pass through entity and charge fees and stuff. But charging fees is a different revenue model than fractional reserve, right? And there's different leverage. Well, there's no leverage creation with a narrow bank charging fees. There is leverage creation with a fractional reserve. I just think I think it would be a good outcome. I don't know that that's where we're going.
Yeah, I would just I'm not totally, but I think I would disagree that the fractional reserve aspect is essential. And I would almost lean to it being more problematic, right? And for different reasons, right? And so I understand the need for elasticity to be in the system, but I think that you provide that elasticity via just these large liquidity pools that people can pull from, right? When they need that elasticity in the environment, right? And I think that's a much more responsible and equitable way of going about it. So I would just say that the fractional reserve aspect of it is really kind of, from my perspective, the problem more than anything.
Well, the like the AMMs and the liquidity pools, they don't really provide. They don't really create leverage. Um,
But they give the elasticity for creators to grow, right? So if you're a business person, you're looking to grow your business, right? You can turn to the pool, get the needed liquidity that you can turn around and then grow your
you get
business.
the liquidity, yes, but there's
Right.
not. It's not like if I take 10 XRP and deposit it into an AMM, I can pull out 20.
No, no, no,
That would
no,
be a
not at all. But I think that the needed elasticity is being able to get the money. Like if you're a farmer, if you're, coffee shop guy, whatever it is that you're needing to grow your business, or even just somebody with an idea that needs access to the capital to then create that idea, right? Then that's the elasticity that's needed. And pulling that from a liquidity pool, I think, is more, democratic in a way that makes it more fair, right? And it doesn't create these dynamics of leverageness that the fractional reserve creates. So I think from
I
that
think
perspective, it's an idea.
I think you're just mixing the terms. I think you're talking liquidity. Elasticity is more around credit creation. So you have like money and then credit, which are kind of the same thing in terms of most people's understanding.
No,
Um,
I don't think I'm confusing them,
but
because if
there's
I'm
no
going
credit
to the pool
there.
to get the liquidity, I'm having to essentially borrow it, and that's the credit side, right?
No, you have to deposit it first, and then like you can put like 10 XRP in and then take 10 XRP out.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm not just
There's
talking
no
about
credit
those.
creation.
Yeah, but that's not the dynamics that I'm talking about, because that's more of a collateral situation to begin with. I'm just saying at a higher evolution of how people could potentially use a DeFi dynamics, right? The pool could be an enterprise, could be operated by an enterprise, right? And it's just people putting liquidity into the pool for a return. So if that enterprise operator is then the risk kind of management side of it, right? He's going out and loaning it to the business person who says that he needs access to the liquidity, right, as a credit function, a loan to the business guy who's going to pay it back plus interest, right? That then he can turn around, take that interest in, and then distribute it back to the liquidity pool people that have the LP tokens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm thinking about it and that dynamics of things, right, with what it could be versus what it is now.
I see what you're saying there.
Because it provides an interesting dynamics that doesn't exist right now. In that, think about it: if businesses are coming to get those loans, right? Then if you have an enterprise kind of acting in there as a intermediary, for lack of a better word, right? So it's not no completely decentralized, autonomous, whatever dream, but it does allow them to release kind of some, in some situations, recoup on collateral. Say if it's a business that neglects to pay back its loan, then it could possess the business and liquidate the business to get returns back. And so it's not as risky as a proposition as just an unsecured loan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Just a lot of different nuances that could go into that.
I get the I get the liquidity pool token getting a spread from the bid-ask spread from the AMM and sharing that with the liquidity providers. I think that makes sense. It's not really fundamentally different than a bank lending out deposits for say 2% and giving 1% back to the depositors. I mean, it's fundamentally the same concept. But there's a difference between doing that from a spread, like you're earning that from an order book, right? From just like transaction, which is effectively transaction fees. Okay, so there's no leverage creation here. There's just fee generation because you're providing liquidity and blah, blah, whatever. Versus you see some of these stable coins that are not AMMs, right? And they're giving or enabling fiat liquidity backed by crypto collateral, okay, across time. See, with the AMMs and stuff, the fact that there's a 2% spread and they pass on 1% to the liquidity provider is fine. There's no loan there, right? This is just transactional, just whatever. Versus a stable coin is more like goes across time. So that smells more like a loan, which is the leverage creation. I think this is one of the reasons stable coins are getting so much regulatory attention. I mean, they're almost getting more regulatory attention than like crypto writ large, oddly, but reasonably so as well. So yeah, I just think there's a difference in the mechanisms there. And we're coming up on the 10-minute mark. So if anybody wants to pop up and ask a question, I'm not trying to derail the conversation, but just a heads up, we got about 10 minutes. Did that make sense, Kashta?
Oh, it did, man, 100%. But we had got down to the last 10 minutes, so I was just quiet, giving everybody else the ample opportunity, man, to kind of go ahead and say maybe what they thought, or maybe say something we didn't think of, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's the only reason I'm quiet at this point.
Yeah, man, you're all good. No, I think it's been a good conversation. I think there's been some good points. Like there's a difference though between credit creation and fee collection.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just, again, I'm always applying it to this real world need or solution kind of dynamics. And so I'm looking at it when you say elasticity, I kind of understand what you're saying and sometimes, but I'm also just looking at it like the premise of why someone's going to need that elasticity at the end of the day, right? Is because they just need the liquidity to be able to scale up whatever idea or fix whatever problem because the stove broke or the engine went down or whatever. So
Well,
that need.
the elasticity comes from the credit creation, right? So this is why it's insane for people to think we're going to get rid of fractional reserve banks. Like that's just it's like throw it in the never going to happen bucket and just kind of forget about it. Because it's the credit creation that allows the economy to sort of breathe in and out, which is your elasticity. Uh, yeah, like I yeah,
But but
it's
here's the thing, right? If you have a customer that is willing to pay, say, give me an interest rate on a business loan, right? Whatever
let's
an
go
average.
with 2% just for round math.
Okay, so business is willing to pay that 2%, right? To go and get access to some money to grow his business, right? Well, if the bank has access to a large liquidity pool, right, that he can say, okay, I'm going to loan out, the money that comes to this pool to these business owners, but I'm going to pay 1.5%, right? He's still able to make 0.5% or so, right? In the scheme of things, right? And he's still
Yeah.
distributing 1% of that total out to. So I just think that there's ways that, again, the technology is not even being explored yet because it's so new. But if we
Well,
keep
just
those base principles,
consider the interest rate a fee, right?
right?
And it's just the way the fee is calculated is completely different versus a
Yeah,
flat fee. Like if I just charge you, I don't know, $1, or we'll just go with 2% to do a transaction, and then I charge you like 2% as long as you hold this stable coin. Like I'm gonna make a lot more money on the interest rate over time. Like in
no,
terms of
imagine this, Karma. What if you didn't do it 2% is just of the nominal value that you're borrowing, right? But what if, like I said, in the enterprise model of things, not in just a direct AMM market maker, but you said, okay, I'm going to loan you this 50,000, but I want 10% equity. Now you've got a perpetual revenue stream that's coming back that you're distributing to the LP token holders based on the performance of the company that you got equity
yeah,
from.
now you're getting into like securities and private equity, and transaction costs are gonna skyrocket, and
But they don't
not
have
like
to, right? Those are all little boxes that we created that we can break down, right? There's, a securities transaction has regulatory things on it because of the risk factor that was involved in those transactions before, right? And that's why they're T+2, right? And you can't, peer to peer it, right? But if you take away that risk factor, there may be a path to us being able to even have peer-to-peer instant settlement world of securities, right? So I just don't want to limit it, but I know we're coming to the end, so I'm gonna shut up again.
Hey, I just wanted to chime in. I was at the grocery store when you guys were talking about having women chime in to the conversations. I totally will speak up, but I am so out of my league with you guys. I do not have a finance background at all, and I just absorb all the stuff y'all are talking about. And I appreciate you having these forums every day. So that's it.
Thank you for sure. Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you joining tonight. I did watch that video you sent the other day, by the way. I just didn't respond.
Yeah, again, not a AI scientist, whatever. Just obsessively research about it. I love talking about it, and yeah, I don't know. I really appreciate you guys doing the forums, like I said, and here to learn.
Hey guys, I don't really have any question myself, but I just wanted to say thanks so much for holding the spaces today. A lot of great conversations, and yeah, I appreciate it. A lot of useful information. So have a great rest of your days, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. If people tell me this isn't this isn't valuable, I'll go do something else. But I'm trying to do this and see where it goes. I don't know. Unless anybody else has another question, I can like do the outro and we can wrap it up. Or Kashta, if you got another follow-on question to what we've been talking about, I've got a few more minutes. It's not like a hard stop.
Yeah, no, I just want to chime in with everyone else, man, and just say thank you for facilitating this space and bringing the value that it brings, to the people that are, here listening and may listen later, right? I don't want to underscore it in any way. Like, I know you're a modest person, man, but you actually do a very good job at hosting these, not just because you're, the host, right? But you have a very, detailed level of expertise in how you process the information and your experiences, right? And so for that reason, man, I'm appreciative of it, right? You're very humble and non-confrontational, and there's just so many things that you bring to the table, man. So yeah, I want to thank you as well.
Yeah, I mean it's all good. I think that's. I mean, I don't know. I've done a few things and intentionally exposed myself to various, say, bodies of knowledge. I don't know. I think what's going on here is actually really important. That's why I mean, if if I didn't think it was important, I wouldn't be doing this. I don't
Well,
know how else to say
I'm
that.
on a learning curve like with you guys, so I like totally get all my information from Twitter and YouTube and the internet, and yeah, like I did like my whole like trading with trial and error. I mean, I couldn't afford 100,000 or whatever education on finance, so trial and error was my way. So I really appreciate everything.
100,000 on Binance? What are you talking about?
Well, whatever. I mean, a degree. Like, I'm not going to go out and get a degree right now. I'm like,
Oh, on finance. Okay,
right,
gotcha.
right.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I just went to, school here in Florida. I probably would have. I think it's one of these who you know, not what you know things. Um, but there's nothing more that somebody like a finance student at Harvard could have learned that I didn't like the math. It's the same. It's just one formula. One. I mean, okay, you can call Black-Scholes the second one, but there's one formula. So, like, I have no clue what somebody at like Harvard could have learned that I didn't learn, and I think it's just more about who you know. So it's weird, like, and I don't think you need to. You don't even need to know the math to get the principles, like to get the concept, the conceptually to like. That's the key. If there's one on the financial part of the education that we'll you know crank through, um, you don't need to know the math in order to get the concepts. Just get the concept, right? And then you can. I even had a actually it was one of my favorite professors. He that was one of the things he said is he was like, you can't do this math in your head, right? It's too much. So it's like, but I want you to get the concept. I want you to be able to look at the problem and just kind of see the direction it's going, right? Like you don't have to put a specific number on it. That's not really relevant. but just does it go in this way or that way, right? And once you get a feel for that, then I think I don't know. I don't know what I think. It's just that's I don't know what I think. I just think it's a good thing.
Well, just keep what you're doing, because you're helping a lot of people out more than you realize.
Well, I hope so. I mean, in my regular life, people don't think I'm doing anything, but they don't listen to these chats and they wouldn't understand anything anyway. So that's interesting. But yeah, I hope I'm helping some people. I mean, if I, that's the purpose, right? I mean, I guess I got to make some money too, but yeah, I mean, the real purpose is to help some people. Hopefully, help some builders, run some hardware, contribute to the network, help more folks understand. That, yeah, makes sense to me. It all seems reasonable, like a reasonable thing to put effort into, I guess. Yeah, whatever.
Hey, Carl.
McQuack, you got your hand up there?
Yeah, like I just yesterday I was just watching the Hugo Filion interview hosted by the Bearable Bull. I was just wondering on this quotation from him, basically that the Flare network is basically built as an insurance network. I'm not quoting him specifically, but I just want to hear your take on that.
Um, I saw a different project that tried to claim insurance. They were Ethereum based. I
So
don't think that's
I'll
going to
quickly,
work out
I'll
well.
quickly, I'll quickly chime in here. So yeah, basically what they're describing is like all the other bridges are just bridges that you accept the risk with no ability to recuperate any of your value if the bridge fails in any way, right? And so the whole basis of what Flare has designed is that if you're moving over XRP and that attestation provider or agent decides that he wants to, not give back the XRP or the bridge some or whatever failure happens, right? You always have enough access without the need of anyone else, right, or any approval or authority that Flare or Songbird will be issued to you when you attempt to redeem it for your XRP, right? And then you could just buy back the XRP that you had there. So you have a built-in on-ledger insurance, so to speak, for any value that you bring over to the chain.
Yeah, that was the next point I was going to make. Good, well done, Kashta. Yeah, it's a double collateral. So the FLR token. Let's say I fail you as a bridge provider, I get penalized, like I lose money. First off, for failing, so I have a incentive to like not do that. Um, and then you get enough FLR. Let's say you had $100 worth of XRP. You're going to get, I think, like 102 or something. I forget what the percentage is, but I think you even get a little more than just the 100 XRP to allow for some slippage, and then you can sell that FLR for XRP and like try a different bridge. So in that's probably the sense that they were talking about it being insured. It's like double collateral. I mean, it's 2.5, but it's basically double collateralized because it's collateralized by the XRP that the bridge operator has on the XRP ledger, right? And then it's also collateralized 2.5x by the FLR on the Flare network. So think about it this way: let's say you got 5 networks that are going to have F assets. I mean, pick them. I don't know. XRP, Ethereum, Bitcoin, blah, blah, whatever, Dogecoin, Litecoin, yada, yada. Who cares? 5 of them. And let's say each of them puts like $1 million on the F asset system. Okay, that's $5 million. So what's 2.5x? Like 15 mil? So that means Flare has to be worth 15 mil. There has to be a minimum of $15 million worth of FLR in order to have 5 million worth of F assets. Just numbers wise.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were talking about the bridges between networks. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it was that. But what I was thinking, it was like, oh, it's ensuring other networks as well. But I guess that would only work if they were just working within the Flare ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would really call that an insurance because, so from a legal point of view, insurance requires the concept of indemnity to be invoked, and that's not really there. There's additional collateralization, which insurance does do beyond just the premiums. Insurance companies have like investment funds that, if like a catastrophic event happens, they can. And then actually, the most expensive cost for an insurance company is insurance, believe it or not, or reinsurance, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's 2.5x collateralized by Spark. You got to be comfortable with the fact that if your bridge provider fails you, you're going to end up with Spark, right? And then you got to be comfortable with trading or FLR. I guess they're not using Spark anymore. You got to be comfortable with trading FLR for, FXRP and then back to XRP through a different bridge that doesn't fail. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a headache, right? A couple extra transactions, but you're still made whole, which is the key. I mean, if the market's moving fast, maybe you get burned a little bit. Maybe you come out on top a little bit. I mean, that can go both ways. I don't know. I think we're probably a little bit over here, but does anybody have another question, or else I'll kind of do the wrap up? All right. Well, anyway, thank you for everyone coming, and to everyone who watches these in the future on YouTube and whatnot. Don't forget to follow us. We're at ledgerscale on Twitter, and turn on the notifications so you know when we go live, and subscribe on like both YouTube and follow us on Twitter. We need to get to 1,000. And then none of this is financial advice, and the speakers are not speaking on behalf of Ledgerscale. This is an open forum, so anybody can speak up, which is appreciated. And yeah, we do appreciate your participation and the questions that you bring up, and our continued efforts. If you want to support that anyway, we do have some crypto addresses at the moment. That's all we have. I'm working on some other methods, but at the top of the Ledgerscale account, there's some various crypto accounts. If you want to donate or something to one of those, we're not even doing anything with it yet, but that's appreciated, or at least encouraging. And yeah, so we'll be back, I guess not tomorrow, but we'll be back Monday. And thank you all. And yeah, we'll see you Monday. Unless anybody else has something else to say, I think that's